I want to take a moment also to recognize Fiscal Note, who sponsored the coffee break, our PM's coffee break. Hopefully everyone got some candy, some sugar, as well caffeinated, because we have a very exciting closing section of the agenda today. And up next, I would like to introduce Natalee Binkholder. She does not look like Congressman Mick Mulvaney, and she will explain to you what why he is not here today. Obviously, we're very enthusiastic to have Congressman Mulvaney's office in support of the chamber and in support of the DC Summit today. Natalee, thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you and your office is doing. It's extremely important to have champions and advocates on Capitol Hill. We've been spending quite a bit of time pounding the pavement on the Hill over the past year, and we do see a bit of an education gap in between the federal agencies and members of Congress. There's a lot of activity happening within the agencies, a lot of regulations, a lot of proposed regulations, a lot of enforcement activity happening. On Capitol Hill, the dialogue has seemed to be a little less relevant because there's no pending legislation, and there's just not the same type of activity that we're seeing in the agencies themselves. There's 535 members. So it is very key that we decrease that education gap that we're seeing. So although we don't necessarily have any pending legislation happening on the Hill, because the agencies themselves are very active, Congress oversees the agencies. And I don't have to give this spiel in this room, at least hopefully I don't have to, but sometimes when I'm traveling to other cities, I have to explain how the dynamics work between the House and the Senate and the legislature and the administration. But Congress oversees the agencies. There's a lot of activity happening in the agencies. If something goes wrong here, it's important that we have allies on the Hill that can get involved if we need them to. And Congressman Mulvaney has been a key advocate for the Bitcoin and blockchain industry, and we're grateful to him and his office, and to Natalee, who oversees financial services issues for him. So with that, I will introduce you to the Deputy Chief of Staff of Congressman Mulvaney, Natalee. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalee Binkholder. I'm Congressman Mulvaney's Deputy Chief of Staff. Mick is very sorry that he cannot be here with you all today. He has pneumonia, so he's down for the count, and we did not want him here infecting everyone else, so you get me instead. I'm glad to hear that you all have had your coffee, so I won't put anyone to sleep during my brief remarks. Mick had planned to give a high-level regulatory overview, and I would like to do that for you today. A question that we often get is Bitcoin really regulated or not? And the short answer is absolutely yes. Bitcoin and blockchain, by the very technology, regulates itself. The protocols set the rules, and the network of users enforces those rules. And it's also regulated by existing laws. Just because a law doesn't say blockchain or Bitcoin in it doesn't mean that the laws don't still apply. A lot of the regulatory activity that's happening now is happening on an ad hoc basis at the federal regulated level. It usually happens through guidance issued to apply existing laws to the new technology, or sometimes and more often through enforcement actions. For example, in 2013, FinCEN issued the first guidance we had outlining how the Bank Secrecy Act would apply to virtual currency. FinCEN has also reached a settlement with a virtual currency company with respect to anti-money laundering and know your customer rules. So we know that these things are going to apply. The SEC has also taken some enforcement actions as well against an individual who is issuing shares of unregistered securities represented as part of the blockchain, and against two other individuals who are running Ponzi schemes using Bitcoin as a payment method. In these cases, Bitcoin was being used as a security, so the SEC had its own existing regulatory authority to act. The CFTC has acted as well and has defined Bitcoin as a commodity for purposes of derivatives transactions. CFPB weighed in as well, issuing some guidance and a consumer advisory on the risks associated with owning a virtual currency. And finally, the IRS has defined a cryptocurrency as property for federal tax purposes. This is largely due to the fact that the IRS code requires a currency to be issued by a government, and in the case of a cryptocurrency, that's not true, so it was difficult for the IRS to be able to define it as currency. So now Bitcoin has capital gain consequences if you want to use it to buy something at Starbucks. These regulations, as you can see, have yielded a variety of results. We have commodities, securities, property, and currency, all for the same kind of technology. That's not necessarily a bad thing, though. Because of the way blockchain technology is used and can operate, it makes sense for the regulators to make different categorizations of that technology depending on how it's used and the space that they regulate. These are very good faith interpretations of the law, and I think it's very important that entities who are working with these technologies comply with the regulations that apply to them. But where's Congress on all of this? Well, Congress isn't doing anything. I know that doesn't surprise many of you. At this point, we are in a monitoring, education, and oversight phase. This summit is a great opportunity for opening the conversation, for educating members of Congress, and for helping the public understand what blockchain technology is all about. We want to make sure that Congress is on the right track with a good basis of understanding of how this technology works before it's time for Congress to act. But Congress certainly will have a regulatory role down the road. It's important that when that time comes, Congress exercise appropriate action with appropriate restraint. We need to find a legal path forward where there is already regulation, but we must not stifle growth and innovation in this space. Sometimes Congress has done its best work when it's refused to act at all. I think the free and open internet is a good example of that. So we want to make sure that when it's time, we are careful about how we act to regulate blockchain technology. One of the things we hope to avoid, though, is a situation where there's a myriad of rules at the federal level and a myriad of rules at the state level, and those rules conflict or have become so burdensome that the technology ceases to grow. When that occurs, then it's very appropriate for Congress to step in and create uniform standards for this kind of technology. The examples from federal regulations do raise already a number of questions that we'll need to consider. Should Bitcoin be categorized as property for income tax purposes? Does that make sense? When we're looking at what's happening at the state level, money transmission licenses are required in every jurisdiction. But for something like Bitcoin, that's already not the case. Some states require those kind of licenses, some have special digital currency licenses, and some haven't made a decision at all. So if that system of patchwork regulations becomes too burdensome, would it make sense to have a uniform standard? We should think about how the criminal penalties in the Bank Secrecy Act apply to digital currency. Someday we may want to look at whether the transactions across state lines for something like Bitcoin are the same as for traditional forms of currency, and whether those criminal penalties should apply in the same way. I'm really glad that the conversation has been elevated to this level. I'm very excited to see multiple organizations working on this, both on and off the Hill. There's a number of wonderful resources for those who want to get more involved in this issue. Obviously, the Chamber of Digital Commerce, Coin Center, Cato, the companies who are represented here today are excellent resources. Dialogue isn't a new thing, but it is very, very important, especially for members of Congress. I look forward to watching the growth of this industry, how it will change in the US and in emergent economies, its potential uses for businesses, and how it can continue to disrupt and innovate. Mick and I hope to be a resource to you, to the industry, and Mick would like to be a leader in this regulatory space when it becomes appropriate. We want to hear from as many people as we possibly can, so please don't hesitate to reach out to him or I, and please let us know any way that we can be helpful to you and to blockchain technology as it continues to grow. I especially want to thank the Chamber of Digital Commerce in Perry and Boring for hosting this event today. It's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to get together, to dialogue, to share new ideas, and to learn more. I appreciate you all for having me here today, and please let us know how we can be helpful to you down the road. Thank you.